Okay, so we talk a lot about large language models on this show. We talk a lot about things like diffusion models for video creation and so on. All that to say is that the transformer model and the way that we think about current LLMs is not just the sole way that people are thinking about this. Generative AI has several different ways that it is being expressed through technology and through models. And before we get into the behavior model, let me mention one other thing just to kind of set the stage and talk about how people are being creative with the different architectures that are there. So we know how a large language model works. It's forward-only next token prediction. Very well, we're very well versed in that. Reasoning models are kind of like that, but they have the ability to maintain a scratch pad and kind of go up and down a tree and so on. And so those are fairly familiar, and those are what we see in the news a lot. Diffusion models are fairly familiar because we see those on Midjourney and DALL-E. But there's actually another way that people are trying to solve for creativity and speed and accuracy and not getting locked into such predictability with large language models, in addition to things like temperature, and that's a large language diffusion model. So if you can think about like an anticipated start and an anticipated end, you can diffuse into the middle bits, right? So it's almost like thinking about a start frame and an end frame for something. You then diffuse into and make associations kind of going towards the center.
Let me check my understanding on this. Tell me if I'm right. A diffusion model, typically we hear about them in the context of image generation. The way it's trained is it starts with a picture of a dog and it says, this is a dog. And then it turns that picture into 10% random noise and says, this is that dog. And then 10% more, so 20% noise, all the way until it is
trained. Yep.
Then it's pure noise.
Just fuzz. Yep. And then you ask the model, it's like, show me a dog, or tell me about the dog. And then it goes into latent space and creates its best approximation of what it believes dogness is.
Yeah, it generates a random screen of noise first and then just turns that into whatever you've asked it for.
Yes. Yep.
So how do you do that with words?
Well, I mean, it's essentially the same thing, right? It's saying, tell me about this paragraph or tell me about this concept. And then it's kind of moving towards the center with that. It's like as it starts to figure out different parts, it's saying, what are the most likely parts between that? Or what are the parts that I might imagine are between it? And it gets it out of the next token rut and gets it more into something where the creativity and the algorithm is working from several different angles at the same time.
In that case, what is the first frame and the last frame that we're comparing? What is the dog and the noise in the language example? Is it the prompt and then an expected result? Oh, no.
Yeah, that's what I believe is that it's still the prompt or the beginning of the context. And then you're as you go through, what the scientists are saying is that using a large language diffusion model can improve coherence because it's not just chained to kind of this more deterministic, kind of almost Markov model way of going through things. It can create increased diversity and creativity while still not necessarily feeling as deterministic in the way that it goes about it. And so large language diffusion models can enhance creative writing, machine translation, conversational AI, and can even be more controlled and flexible in the way that they generate text. So it's what it shows more than anything is that people haven't figured out what the end state of language-based AI is right now, and they're getting their inspiration from anywhere that they can, trying to increase the efficacy of the different models that are there. All that's just set up, though. So,
oh boy.
So.
Okay.
When we get to the main topic, all of that to say, as people are thinking about interesting ways of using the architecture and finding real use cases, there was a great presentation that I watched recently. I'm going to butcher his name as I try to say it. Rikard Burrell Gabrielsen. Who is an MIT PhD. He's the co-founder of Unbox AI, and he was presenting at an MIT conference, MIT Sloan Management Conference, and talked about his large language behavior model, which apparently is kind of white labeled and is powering up to 20 million transactions a week right now.
What?
And
what?
Yeah.
What do you mean transactions?
Well, like retail spaces and things like that is understanding if person has this preference and does this behavior, how do I shape the behavior to influence the outcome that I want?
Oh, wow. Okay, so my first full-time job was in a grocery store, and I remember getting into long conversations with the merchandising managers about like the tempo of the music we play, the flow through the store, all of those like subtle behavior
kind of
cues.
Stuff.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Back when I was, 2000 to 2004, when I was working at the home office for Walmart and Sam's Club, we had this big initiative at the time doing Teradata analysis, and it was all about behavior pattern correlation and prediction. And so like we knew that between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., that there was a correlation of people that would buy diapers and people that would buy beer. And they would be in the same basket. You'd look at basket analysis. So there's an affinity between those two products. And you can imagine it's like the new mom is at home calling the husband saying, hey, on the way home, can you grab some diapers? And then the husband's also like, well, I'm also going to get a 12-pack of beer at the same time.
Right. My first thought was tired parents. Like, I'm going to grab some beer and diapers just to survive.
And so you use affinities like that for things like product placement. Or end caps or displays. And so another one would be that, there's a natural correlation or an affinity between cereal and bananas. Mm-hmm. So on the cereal aisle, if you want to get this top of mind or more impulsive buy, you might have an end cap or some kind of display chain that has bananas hanging from it. Same thing over like in the milk aisle. Yeah, you might have those things. So you're always trying to understand what behavior can unlock another behavior. And that's what this large behavior model is said to do. It's been trained on over 1 trillion human actions. And it focuses on human actions and desires so that they can provide businesses with unparalleled insights into consumer behavior. They say that unlike conventional large language models, which rely on feature-based analysis, Behavior GPT prioritizes the behavioral dimension, enabling businesses to uncover true consumer preferences and refine product recommendations. And so an example in the talk, and we'll link the talk in the show notes, is that if you were to go to a large language model and talk about, let's say, a product that has Skyline in the name, the large language model might try to say, well, you should have something with a San Francisco skyline in it and something with a Seattle skyline, in Seattle.
Chili.
But when you're doing behavior analysis, you might find that the word skyline, but matched with a color on the label, is going to unlock a different buying dimension. And so because the behavior GPT is multimodal from the start, it starts to create an entirely different affinity-based analysis that can predict and help shape future buying actions.
So by virtue of being multimodal, then it's ingesting content other than just text, right? That's what that means. It's able to process
text. Yep.
Images, video, like visual things. So essentially retailers could just throw an aggregate of all of like the text sales data and things like that they have, visual data of what those products look like to correlate things like you said, like the labeling. Yep. So, wow. So this is that kind
I'm also assuming CCTV footage, probably, because one of the things that happens in retail, and this was going on at Walmart and other retail as well, is you do like dwell time analysis for people as they're on the aisle. And so they'll stop, they'll look at something, and it's like, if they look at something for that long, what is that a predictor of a buy? Is it a predictor of some other kind of action? And so you can start to get into those types of analyses as well.
That's super interesting. And I can imagine at the time that you were working at the head office of Walmart, they probably would have killed for something like this. Like that's...
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were innovating the vast majority of this kind of stuff at the time. The largest retailer in the world is going to be at the forefront of all that. They were really, really focused on all of that kind of predictive analysis and sentiment analysis, basket affinity analysis, analysis of video data to not only understand buying patterns, but also predict things like slip and fall, so that you can deal with risk internally and so on. So the impact of... Oh, go ahead.
how well does this work compared to like the traditional methods we've been using to determine these kinds of things? Like, how good is Behavior GPT?
They say it's pretty good. I mean, this is coming from the creator. But what they say is that clients that are using Behavior GPT have reported a 20% boost in sales and the creation of new revenue streams, proving its effectiveness and driving business growth. So
20% is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah. And it is a PhD who's a co-founder of Unbox AI and works at MIT. I assume that there's a lot of legitimacy in the research. The thing that they even talk about in the presentation is that there's interesting learnings that come from moving from the academic research stage to the actual implementation in the real world stage, and that's where you get to these trillion human actions, where you can really just kind of throw so much data at it that you're going to get these really interesting combinations and outputs. And when you think about how data hungry AI is, being able to throw a trillion interactions at something is new, unique data that can unlock really cool insights. That's why large language models ingest all of the internet, and why they say that they still need more data.
This is such an intuitively sensible use case too, because the thing that these models do is draw connections that are not like obvious based on all sorts of different factors. So this seems like a really good application where the AI would work very well. A 20% increase in sales is huge. That's like that big impact on the bottom line.
It's big. Yeah, and speaking of bottom line, I mean, if you turn the temperature up in this thing, it might say that if you're about to buy Cheerios, your next purchase is going to be underwear. I don't know what the hallucinations or the weird affects of throwing the temperature dimension up in this too much is going to cause, but it would be interesting to look at that at some point too.
Yeah, I want to see like a deeper demo of this, but I imagine that I can't have access to it. Do we know what retailers have it or who's using it or anything?
No,
is it pretty locked down?
What I saw was pretty vague. They did mention that they white label it, like you don't necessarily know that it's their model that's in use, but it is processing about 20 million customer interactions per week right now, which is actually small on the grand scheme of things when you think about the number of consumers in the US and around the world. But it's enough for them to start to, they've got a launching pad for growth for sure.
Proof of concept. Yeah. I'm going to keep an eye out for that. So that's useful and could even help improve safety like we were talking about. And in the name of safety, something else came out recently that absolutely doesn't take safety into consideration at all, right?
Right. Well, at least not as much as you would think that most other models here in the U.S. would take into consideration.
Not as much as I would hope personally. No. We'll investigate that in just a second. Stay right here.
This is the FAIK Files.